And hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Free Range American. Today, I have a very, very special and important guest to me personally. I have a long history with this person. I've known him since the year 2003. Does that make sense?
Yep.
This is Colonel retired Peter Donnelly. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, JT. Awesome to be here.
I'm super excited because we've been talking about having you on for quite some time now. You, myself, and a few other people that we know from the community have been doing some things on the side since you retired, and you've since ran with that and have been spearheading the whole thing with A15 Publishing. And I know a lot of our fans and listeners and people that have followed us a long time for a while know about A15 Publishing, and you're kind of the mastermind behind the whole thing. But before we get into that, let's start with when your history in the Air Force.
You want all 30 years?
Oh, hey, we'll start at the beginning. We'll get into when you jumped off of into the ALO world, and then the big impact that you had in the TACP community, in the ASOS and ASOG community. So yeah, by all means.
Okay. Well, it probably is good background to start from the beginning, but I won't dwell too long on any one period. I went through OTS after college. Like most, I felt that need to serve. Had a great childhood, and also that was my thought about paying it back. So I went to OTS. That's when it was in San Antonio. Graduated, and it was 84. So still right in the heart of the Cold War. And actually, just about 10 years away from ending. So everybody in the class, I graduated, I got navigator, and I went off to nav school at Mather, which was in Sacramento. Awesome place. The base was awesome too back then. They used to have huge parties and everything on Friday nights. That's a whole another story, but so being the heart of the Cold War, everybody either got a bomber or a tanker, unless you were, exceptional or in the Guard. So I got a bomber. I got assigned to Fairchild Air Force Base, which was awesome. I loved the Pacific Northwest. And actually, because of the way things were going with SAC, they had a PCS freeze. So I ended up spending 8 years there. And
that is Strategic Air Command, for those of you not familiar with the Air Force acronyms. And does SAC still exist, or did they disband that?
It's disbanded. Okay. They have a Global Strike Command, and things are evolving yet again.
And Strategic Air Command back then, I mean, this was in the heart of the Cold War, so everything was being wrapped around nuclear. All of our nuclear assets, things that can carry nuclear munitions and stuff like that. And you guys were kind of the center point.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Right. And at that time, I think there were still 11 bomber bases, and we were all pulling alert at that time. It eventually started to wean off of that. But so we had 6 B-52s, and each B-52 actually was almost the equivalent of the third most powerful country in the world as far as nukes. Had us and the Russians.
Here's a question I have for you, since you served, both in the thicket of the GWAT the entire time of its existence, but you came in around then. What was it like being in the Cold War, where it was a battlefieldless war, I guess you could say? Like, what were the tensions like? Were there times like you guys would get briefings and it was like, this is it? Like, were there times where you ever woken up and they tell you to come in and you're like, oh no.
Oh yeah.
Because I know my dad had a few of those incidents where the sub had to launch in the 80s because there was one year where every Russian sub just took off and started headed towards the East Coast, and no one knew what the fuck was going on. So what was it like in your guys' realm, kind of being in that time frame?
Yeah, it's just as you described, and it's interesting you mentioned having met your dad, the situation that he was in there, and on the West Coast, the subs would come in, and if you were on alert, you ended up doing what was called double ARP, nothing to do with old people, but it was alert aircraft repositioning. And instead of being in the alert facility waiting for the klaxon to go off, you actually sat inside the airplane, sitting on the runway, kitted up, ready to go, cartridges in the engines, and you just waited.
So that's like a next level alert.
Yes. Yeah. And then the level after that is actually airborne. So you would launch, and they had a spot called the positive control turnaround point, the PICTAP. And if you launched on that's now serious. You'd go and you'd hold at that spot, and you'd wait to get the codes. I think this is actually underrepresented in anything like movies, even some books, that the Cold War, the idea that we were going to go toe-to-toe with the Ruskies and exchange nukes, and the way that we had it set up with the triad, the missiles, the submarines, and the bombers, it was, like if you think about it now, it sounds really insane, but it was so orchestrated. And today, I'm going to leap way ahead here to like today, we have most of our military, including the leadership, grew up after that was over. So we didn't learn how to fly and fight without radars, without radios, because we knew the Russians were going to jam everything. We knew all of our nav aids were going to be destroyed, taken out, or shut off by ourselves. So we learned how to operate in that denied environment. And now it's very difficult to try to get, and I'll say younger guys, that's accurate, but everybody's not a spring chicken. But most of the folks today, you think about it, that was almost 30 years ago.
Yeah. But as I'm putting myself in that position, I'm just curious, that is a weird conflict, if you will, or a weird time frame to specifically be in the position that you were in, because you're the main focus between you guys and the submarines. Like, you guys were our get it on target. We have the big Minutemen, ICBMs all in the middle of the country. But it was you guys that was kind of, I don't know, what would you call it? Like the scare tactic, or like, hey, we're going to be able to touch you.
Yeah,
instantly.
That's a good analysis, because the bomber was the only one that could be recalled. The submarine that launches missiles, the silos, it's over. So we were the stick that poked the bear. There were times we were sent to the Russian border, the international separating line on the west, between the east and the west.
Alaska and Russia.
Right. We'd fly up there, up the Pacific, and we'd orbit, emit a little bit so they knew we were there. They'd send out interceptors. We've been escorted several times away from their territory, just like the Bear bombers did with us. A cat and mouse teasing game, and everybody just kept their fingers crossed that nobody would make a big mistake.
That's wild. All right. So you were there for, you said what, 12 years?
8 years.
Or eight. Oh.
Yeah. So I left there as a captain, and then a quick story, excuse me, relating to Fairchild was most of the folks in the military, and at the time it was national news about the B-52 that crashed there, and one of the squadron members was the squadron commander, Mark McGeehan, who went down as the co-pilot. He went down with everybody else in the plane. All great guys, all personal friends. I didn't know the vice wing commander very well, but the rest of them I either crewed with or were friends with. But the reason I bring up Mark McGeehan is because he got me my next job. And I flew on that crew that did the air show. and that was my job.
And this is for context. This is an extremely famous incident, and it was 1991, correct?
Yep. Mm-hmm. I think 98, 91.
It was somewhere.
No, sorry. It was 94.
94.
Yep.
A B-52 is flying at the air show at Fairchild, and as it goes into a turn, it just goes into the ground. And yes, that video has been around. It's been showed at safety briefings and everything like that. So this is what you're talking about.
Yep. Right. So him getting me that job and insisting that I not fly the air show and stick to the plan that he had for me as my mentor and an example of how leaders take care of subordinates. He insisted I go on schedule to the academy, which really saved my life. And the academy job was great. I started really kind of honing how I would lead things. Actually, I did that well before, as we all do as you grow up in the military. But it was a really fun job because you had a bunch of academy cadets that didn't really know anything about the military. You're trying to tell them about the realities of it and everything. And it was a lot of fun. They're great people, and spent 2 years as was called an AOC, as Air
Operations. Oh,
this is different. Yeah, this is Air Officer Commanding, and so you're the responsible person in charge of all these irresponsible cadets. So I did that for 2. Then I did the IG, deputy IG, which I would come back to do later in my career. There for 2 years also, and that's where I learned why they call the academy the zoo. There were so many crazy things going on there, and
I've never heard that. So,
excuse me, sorry. The one actually, if you go there, have you been?
Yes.
Academy? Yeah. So you know where the chapel is, and it's got you're overlooking the terrazzo. So where all the cadets assembled, that's really why they call it the zoo, is because you got all the civilians sitting up there looking down at the cadets like they're zoo animals. But so I learned a lot again, a lot of really crazy things, too much to go into. After that, I went to Langley, which is actually where I'm at now. Spent 3 years there. And then in 2001, I moved up to Fort Drum. And then just a couple months, and that's when I became an ALO, Air Liaison Officer, and with the 10th Mountain Division. And what was it? Probably 3 months later, 9/11 happened, and I was off to the races.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
And you were on the ground fast. How many days between 9/11 going down and you being in theater? Where did you stage K2?
Actually,
how long was it?
Sorry. So 9/11 happens. General Longoria comes out to the 20th ASOS, which is the ASOS that's aligned with the 10th Mountain Division, as you know. And if we count the days, it was maybe a couple weeks. He came out after 9/11, couple weeks. And then we deployed to Kuwait in November. And then from there was a whole sequence of events that I kind of put it like I Forrest Gump my way through the beginning of the war. And I was assigned as kind of like an ops officer at the headquarters of 3rd Army for the Air Force liaison element there. And
so that's a corps. So you were the corps ALO pretty much.
Not quite. General Longoria was.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But as you were on the jock floor then. Yeah. As that position, briefing the theater commander on what air assets and air power and stuff we had to offer.
Yeah, pretty much. And then things happened, and on this 5th of December, a B-52 strike in support of SOF.
Triple nickel 555.
And we had a fratricide.
Mm-hmm.
So Colonel Longoria at the time sent me into Camp Rhino, which is where the Marines were staging out of, to link up with the ODAs and to assist them in making sure there were no more fratricides caused by B-52s. Was the rationale of sending.
And just go, if you could explain what a fratricide is, or a fratricide incident, because it is one of those things that is one of the most scary things for a JTAC or a friendly unit.
Yeah, good point. As a JTAC yourself, the objective of the entire community, the air-ground community and the Air Force, is to prevent airplanes from dropping bombs on friendlies. So what happened in this case, there was something went awry, and actually a friendly weapon hit friendly forces, thus the term fratricide.
It was new gear. It was gear that nobody had ever used before, and it caused this incident to unfold the way it did. So you went out there to investigate, or were you just there to kind of ask questions and then and do some teaching to make sure that it didn't happen again?
A little bit of both. And from there, this is actually, I think it's a great story. It was very uncomfortable at the time, but so I landed at Camp Rhino. Actually, we took off out of, I'm not sure if I can tell you where, but we flew into Afghanistan, and we were about, I'd say we were about 10 minutes away, and the base was under fire, and we were taking SAM shots in the MC-130 that we were flying in. It was me and about 10 other special forces guys from different countries. And after about the fourth SAM shot that went off, it was air bursting right next to the aircraft. The pilot had enough, turned around, flew back to the location. We landed, and my orders were to get there. So I jumped on the next plane, got in the next night. It was really just crazy. I was like, I never thought I'd go to the war by myself. So I get there, I'm dragging my bags. At the time we still had to carry around all the chem gear and stuff like that. It was just, A bags and your rucksack and radios, everything. It was just, quite the typical load that you're used to. So I walked through the jock door, and there's General Mattis. Yeah. So I figured, well, might as well go meet the man. And I'm walking up to him, and I'm starting to salute him. And he says, "Who the fuck are you? And what the fuck are you doing on my airbase?" And he immediately stopped everything he was doing. And for the next X number of minutes, he escorted me to the Talcy at the end of the runway and ordered them to put me on the next aircraft off the airfield. And it was just a dirt strip. I couldn't do that. He's not my boss. I had orders.
I know. This just seems like I'm familiar with this story because as we progress in your history, this is a book that you've written. So I'm familiar with this. But to me, it's just like, it seems like an utter waste of time. Like, because not anybody that knows military operations, not everybody has control or knows what's going on. So why would you even bother wasting your time with a guy that's obviously on a mission that was given to him by somebody higher to just interfere with that? Because all you're doing is causing more delay and more time, because what this is going to turn into, if it played out how he wanted, you get put back on a plane, you go back, and then somebody higher than him tells him to stop doing that, and you go back, and now you've just wasted how much time trying to get the original mission done that you were given to do.
Yeah, well, that's true. But I think we've all learned the character of General Mattis, and I think I respect him. I like him, actually. And fast forward after the invasion, and I'll tell that real quick. But we met up again, and I reminded him of him escorting me to the end of the runway, and he laughed, and he said something like, same guy's different shithole or something like that. It was a friendly exchange. So I E&E'd back to the compound, and long story short, I linked up with an ODA, and they didn't have a JTAC at the time, and they had an open hole in their ODA, so they said, come along, we could use you. So I actually, that's where the Forrest Gumping started, and we participated in.
Now you find yourself as a JTAC with a Special Forces team.
Yeah, and again, I'm a couple months as a ALO. I got my certification, and so now I'm running around downrange. We took over Kandahar. Most of that was done by the prep work was done by some great JTACs. I'm sure you've might have even interviewed them that did all the handiwork that opened up the field. We assaulted it, but there wasn't much left to do. So I ran around with the ODA there for a couple of weeks, doing some SR missions, strategic reconnaissance, things like that. And then I actually flew back up to K2. That was actually the first time I got up there, and Shaq Beauchene, my squadron commander at the 20th, was positioned up there to integrate with 5th Special Forces Group to help out with all the air-ground stuff. So I worked for him for a few weeks, and then another mission came up, went downrange, came back, and then circling it all back, it culminated in the first conventional battle of the GWAT, the Global War on Terror, was Operation Anaconda. Yeah. And I ended up being the primary ALO, the guy who ran all the air support for the operation. And that was nuts. It was a furball. I did some things before the operation kicked off. The Air Force felt that it wasn't properly informed, which wasn't the case. I was there. I was the 10th Mountain ALO. 10th Mountain had taken over from 5th Group as the lead for the operation. And again, I could go on for that for quite a while, but eventually it was about 2.5, almost 3 weeks of fighting. And it was very interesting, and there's still lessons learned from that. It's been characterized repeatedly since then as a really screwed up operation, but it really wasn't. When you have 1,411 soldiers air assaulting in and 1,411 coming out, can't be that bad. And 1,000 of the enemy didn't go home.
Wow.
It's pretty good. However, there was Roberts Ridge.
Yeah, and Takugar was going down right at pretty much the beginning of that, right?
Yeah, the operation kicked off on the 2nd, and Roberts Ridge was the 4th. So, and then again, heroism times XX, and we just had recently one of our airmen there just was awarded the Medal of Honor for that posthumously. And just recently, so that's what almost 20 years ago. Yeah. And then the interesting thing is that after that, we all kind of culminated back at Kuwait, hitting the reset button, and the colonel pulls us in, just a couple of us, and says, "Hey, good job and everything, but we're getting ready to invade Iraq." So we broke right into the planning for that, and that was my next. I was still at the 20th. I was only there for 2 years, but then we launched the invasion of Iraq, and I participated in that first push.
I was in my last week of basic training, and we weren't really doing anything but cleaning up and getting ready for graduation. And I was on a detail on the parade grounds, and the TIs ran out and called us all in and flipped on the TV, and the bombing had just started in Iraq. And they were like, they look so scared, these MTIs. They were like, oh my God, we're in 2 wars right now. And I'm like, yeah. So then how did you manage to get pushed down to the 14th ASOS, which is the TACP squadron in Fort Bragg, just after 2 years of being up at Fort Drum?
That was a tour at that in those days.
Oh yeah, that's
Halo
right.
tour 2 years. So it was time to move. And at that point, my boss, General Longoria, or I keep calling him General, he left the service as General, but at the time he was Colonel. So I just say LA. LA had designs to help me in my career and progress, and he saw something in me. So he wanted to send me to what he felt was, and I think, we would agree, best ASOS in the world.
Yes. Especially that time frame.
Yeah, it was awesome. And so I got there, and when you were there, right off the bat, 2003, I was a DO. Did that tour for 2 years. Deployed once as the EASOS commander, and then I formally took over. Did 2 more years as the commander. And then I did deputy commander of the 18th ASOG and then commander of 18th ASOG. During that time, I deployed 4 times to Iraq and 3 times to Afghanistan. And then just before retirement, I got my elephant burial ground job, and they said, "Okay, you can go be the deputy IG at ACC,
the Inspector General."
So I had a little experience with that. So I went, and it was actually a fun job. And
was it?
Yeah, because you got.
I'll predict this for you. I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's like you have always been one of the best people of handling situations in such a calm and objective lens. So for you to go in and take a job where you have to go investigate a situation and see who was actually wronged in these, I think that was a great place for you to end up at. Well,
thanks, and that's I hope that played out that way. It felt like it, and then I actually, sorry, the best part of it was it kind of reminded me of what the bigger Air Force was all about. You know how it is being in the air ground business and an ASOS as a JTAC or a TACP. You have 1 foot in each camp. You're in the Air Force, but they don't really get you. And then the Army
don't really
doesn't
even pay attention to you.
No. And those days we were so underrepresented. There was no wing. The ASOG commander reported directly to the 9th Air Force, or the NAF commander.
Not once in my entire time did I ever see a base commander or wing commander come over to an ASOS. Just like, what? I don't know what's over there.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want them to ask me any questions. I don't know who these guys are.
So yeah, that's awesome. Now you have 2 Bronze Stars with Valor?
One.
One?
Yeah.
Well, when was that one from?
Afghanistan.
The first one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was that a danger close drop?
No, that was with the ODA and some ground actions.
Oh yes, I remember. That's the situation. You guys got rolled up on by a BMP, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. That was.
You want to talk about that?
Not too much. There was some waving and single digit exchanges first, but that was just outside of Kandahar. And there was some other stuff that was going on. It's hard to say things like it was really exciting and it was fun. You can say that in retrospect. People misinterpret how you mean that.
Don't worry. A lot of the guys we've had on before, they definitely go with the fun route.
Yeah. You really can't think of anything that's more exciting than going to war. I mean, it's just, sure.
But when it's your entire focus for so many years is preparing for a situation you don't know if you'll ever be in real life, and then you're in it, there is this sense of like, oh my God, it's finally here.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you leave it, it's hard to kind of get over it. You know how it is, especially after the first tour where I was almost entirely in the field. Even just sleeping without your weapon felt very weird and took some getting used to. And then you feel like the job, it's not over. there's no victory parade. There's
Yeah.
no surrender.
There was no flaunt. We weren't pushing a line,
No.
of troops or an enemy with a uniform. There was no, specifically with Afghanistan, there's no fall of power. It's just pockets of battles here and there in different states or districts or areas. And yeah, you're right. That's a super funny way to look at it.
Yeah, I think that's part of what bonds the veterans together is those shared experiences that are kind of hard to understand and explain if you weren't in that seat. Folks can conjecture a little bit, but you know what it's like, and hopefully it ends up being a positive. I know it's not always. That we have a lot of our brethren that suffer ill effects of it, and some of what I'll let you, if you want to, I'll tell you about is some of the books that we've published are actually rooted in those negative experiences, dealing with PTSD, just the horrors of war, and thinking about that every day and trying to get over it, and things like that. And writing for some is an outlet. So we've tried to provide that outlet through our publishing.
Yeah, so you retired after 30 years, 30 even?
Yeah, a couple months.
And it wasn't long after that we all started chatting about getting into the publishing game because we wanted to be, we wanted to learn or learn the self-publishing process and then give guys that had these amazing stories the guidance or the push they needed to write their books. And your one that you were working on for a long time was one of the first ones we put out, and that's called Off We Go. And it starts right before September 11th. Well, no, it starts and talks about your time in SAC and being up at Fairchild and stuff.
Briefly, yeah.
Yeah, and then it goes into the kickoff of 9/11, and you could talk about it. Yeah, tell us about Off We Go.
Well, thanks to you. I had tried to get the book published. It took me 10 years to write it, and it was a learning process and a lesson in patience and frustration. Once I finished it to where I felt fairly comfortable with it, I approached mainstream agents and also mainstream publishing houses, and I think I submitted 37 submissions to those submissions to 37 different publishing places and publishing houses, and got a 2 rejection letters. The rest were all silent. Never heard anything from them. But the feedback that I was getting was that they weren't really interested in military fiction, and unless it was a very noteworthy, already popularly known event, they weren't interested. So, you said, hey, what do you say we put together a publishing company? I go, that sounds good.
I saw the success that guys like Leo and Marty Skovlin were doing with the stuff that they had the books that they had wrote and put out. And they were 2 Army Ranger veterans and friends of ours that they just started writing books, and they had kind of spearheaded or just self-learned this process to keep the control and publishing in your own hands, to where you can put out the story you want without anybody modifying it or telling no or anything like that. So it was, you had mentioned that project to me so many times. It really was that one that made me want to push it in, because I knew somebody like yourself would take it seriously in learning what Leo and Marty could teach us about that realm, and then run with it or create the process at least, so we knew when we wanted to write our stories that we'd have an expert internally.
Well, thanks for that. I may not agree with the expert part. It's been a long learning process, and you mentioned Marty. We talked almost, I think, even before we formally formed the company, and having read Violence of Action I met Marty, and by the way, his book remains, if not our number one, it's either one or two best-selling books to this day. It just keeps selling and selling. Great book, great effort by himself. And so as we started to go through the process, we made some wrong turns, I think, in how we thought we could accomplish the goal of providing an opportunity platform for veterans. That's really what it was, is how do we get the veteran story out there? How do we get veteran writers recognized? And we want to capture, the objective became capturing as many stories as we could of veterans that didn't want to necessarily even write a book, so we were going to help. So from that came There I Was. There I Was is a compilation of war stories, or veteran stories. Doesn't have to be a war story, but that was our second book that we released, and it covered from World War I till the present day. A lot of our brethren that we had served with offered up stories. We had World War II, 3 stories from there, great stories. And then from that, we got a story from a submission from a Vietnam vet. We wouldn't have published the book unless we had stories from Vietnam vets. And we got one from Lieutenant Colonel retired John Headley, and he wrote Saddle Up. And it is, if you think about Platoon, I think this is more realistic. That's kind of not the right way to say it, but I'd say at least on par those experiences. And John was in a recon element, and great writer. And we stay in touch today. And his book still sells really well. There's an appeal to Vietnam, I think, like no other era. And the other aspect that I really benefited from was meeting these great vets. And our most recently, we have a World War II. He's one of a handful of the only living veterans who served in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And he served in combat in all 3, was decorated. He lives in Philadelphia. We've been trying to link up, and then, the virus thing happened. But Leo Herzog.
Is he the only one living that has 3 stars on his CIB?
I'm not sure. I actually went down there and met him, and we talked. He showed me some stuff. Has very little compared to all the stuff we're just showered with these days. With every decoration comes in a little thing, and you got those stacked up. And he had like one piece of paper and some things on it, but he was recognized at I think it was a Phillies game, and he was in his uniform and everything. Great guy. So we're going to try to tell his story. It's just the logistics have been difficult, but it's not only the military stories. It's veterans writing all genres. We've had science fiction, kids books. We've had a lot of kids books, novels. Sure, there's a lot of memoirs. They're all great. It's just fun to read, and those individual stories, and we're knocking them out left and right, and not just the participating veteran. Great example is Mike Shropshire, his wife Julie. She served as a role player at NTC. Excuse me. And she wrote a book called Blood Girl. That was her nickname because they put fake blood on her that she looked like she was a wounded native, and a great book of her experiences. And I could go on and on. I got them all stacked up here too.
Yeah. Also, I see some of them in the back too.
Yeah. So it's been a learning experience, but we keep refining and trying to make it as easy as possible on the veteran. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I don't want to dominate this.
Oh no, not at all. Like for anybody out there that you thought your story or you had an experience that was crazy and you've always dreamed of writing a book about it, or even if you just always dreamed of writing a book about it. I mean, this is one of those things that we got involved in quite a few years ago, early on, and Like, it exists, and we haven't talked about it a lot. So I'm glad we get to. I'm glad we're talking about it now, because hopefully there's a lot of guys out there that get inspired from hearing you talk about this and jump on possibly putting a submission into A15.
Yeah, we encourage it. It's a tough racket. You got to really manage expectations. I know that if you're a celebrity, selling a book is a 3-foot putt. Somebody writes it for you, they edit it for you. You just sit back and wait for the royalties. With us, it's different. We assume all the risk, so we're not in it for the money. We're in it for the legacy
product.
Yeah, and the finished product, right, and to help the veteran. So actually, what the company could really use is some help with some of the things that I outsource for. Like if you like to read, we just like to give the raw product to different people to read it. We call those beta readers, and they just give us a coffee shop review. How'd you like the book? How'd you like the characters? Et cetera. So that gives us an opportunity to give feedback to the veteran, to go back to the drawing board, maybe go back and, some folks just, you got to really take a class. There's a thing to writing, and it's, a lot of people feel it in their heart, but you have to have the technical skill to execute. So we can help with that, but what that does is the more that we have to spend on the book, it slows our processes down, and we're really kind of.
I would say yes. There's definitely when you haven't done this yet, there is different expectations or different how you think it plays out. I just from a personal standpoint, having my idea for fishing with nets for so long and constantly like writing it in my head. And then when it came to the time to sit down with the writer I partnered up with, and we start actually like chewing into this thing, and then realizing that we're 10 chapters in, and you know what? This format doesn't really translate like it would if it was a podcast. So it's like, okay, we need to go back and revisit the format and how we're telling this story, and essentially start over. So it's like there is a lot of that, because again, I was the same way. I thought, oh, I have this in the bag. This is easy. This is a weekend project. And then when you actually get into it and you do it, you're like, oh man, this is hard.
Yeah. And what's makes it more difficult is that, as I said before, it's a tough racket, because technology has made self-publishing and writing easier. It doesn't mean it makes it better or ensure that it is actually good. It just makes it doable. So there's billions and billions of books out there that you're competing with in whatever genre that you like and want to write in. So it's excuse me, very difficult. So if you have managed to succeed, then you're onto something, because you've found a niche. I'm anxious to see how your book turns out. I think
we're changing the style completely, and it's going to be a more overall like overview look at the relationship spectrum. So we think we have a good new direction. We'll see how it translates once we start executing.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that I think is a good feeling for us as a company is to we know how it feels to succeed in that tough market, and getting a book published is it's a defining event for folks. And if you're writing about something that means a lot to you, or if you're writing about something that you're trying to help somebody, say with PTSD, and you're taking them down a path that you went to success, and you write about it, and it's satisfying to know that you may have contributed to the overall veteran community.
Yeah, So did you like being in the ALO realm? Was that the right move for you, you think, after you look back on it?
Absolutely. Loved it. Loved it. I almost feel like I had two full careers, and the second one as an ALO was the better of the two. I love the first, but the people I met, the things I got to do, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, also too, you being a squadron commander in my squadron, and then, I remember our meetings and things like that where we're talking about changes, and then you eventually got to go up and take the group and like actually start really changing things that we had always been like, man, this would be so much better if we could get this or do this. So
yeah, and that's another aspect. I'm glad you brought that up. It was very satisfying to be able to affect an actual change in this business, especially when we were deploying constantly. It was deja vu all over again. You'd go downrange, you'd leave there with a set of problems in place that you just couldn't get to, and then you go through a rotation cycle. You come back, and lo and behold, there they are. So it really made you strive to achieve an actual change. And I did feel like I got to do that.
I'm going to take you on a couple stories to get your perspective on it, because I think it's really funny. Like specific things that happen with you as our commander. And like it also too, telling all you guys out there, like how different the military has become now than it was 20 years ago. I know everybody says that, but yes, you cannot do the things that we did 20 years ago now, or even start. But specifically, this is like one of the funniest things to me, because I can't believe that I was in a formation during a commander's call and heard this said. But we were at sports day for the base. And us being, the TACP squadron on Pope Air Force Base, we're competitive and everything. So we're being loud and we're talking a bunch of trash, and we start pissing off the services career, squadron, who are, they're the people that work at the gyms and the chow hall and everything like that. Well, they got so mad that a couple of them, waited for one of our guys to walk back home from our squadron to the dorms, and they jumped him, like old school jumped him. And when we found out, we all split up into teams and hit the base. And I remember Spreeder and I went into the chow hall and we started asking questions, and you could see that there were like 4 guys in the back, like just deer in headlights, like, oh God, that you could tell that we found the guilty ones right there. Well, right after we go to walk out that building is when we get the phone call that says, get back to the squadron. There's a commander's call. And you walk into the room and you go, let me just say this first. You will not go around base and start fighting like you're in gangs. And I just remember being like, this is the funniest commander's call or ass chewing ever. So from your side, like, do you remember this?
Yeah. It was also, you reminded me of something that is funny, and I'm not going to take your time, but when we were, remember when we had those base runs, and it was right as they were transitioning to the Air Force PT outfit uniform, and we still had our black t-shirt and black shorts, and we came up singing Jodi's, which nobody else on base could
they don't
do.
Even know them.
No. So
let alone, like the run is hard for them, let alone being able to sing and be in step.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, running up to the formation, and everybody else was in their bright, shiny Air Force blue PT gear uniforms, and we all had our black on, and the wing commander was up on some stage with a microphone, and we came in perfect, awesome, pulled into formation, and halted, and he just said, "Hey, don't be intimidated by them. They put their pants on one at a time, just like us."
Always, always. I remember doing the 82nd Airborne Division run with you, and I was right up. I think I was carrying the guidon because that's why I was running next to you. I remember there's always like the CG, or there's one of the generals that stands on that podium as every unit comes in, and he announces the unit. And I remember we're coming up and they go, and next we have these guys, because we're just in black shorts and black shirts, because our shirts, really, they just had a parachute on them. Like,
yeah. And looking through the guidebook, like, who are those guys?
Yeah, I know. It's changed so much because, last year, a few squadron commanders got ripped out of their seats over the taping up and rolling. And it's like, to me, I feel like that's a mislabeling and a misunderstanding. And I see it as a mid-tier person in the middle upper management fearing that that's going to cost them their job. But in retrospect, it's like, if General Goldfein gets a note on his desk that says, hey, you know all those guys that you have out there calling in CAS on the bad guys? Well, they're roughhousing up in Alaska. Like, do you really think General Goldfein is worried about the guys he sends to go drop bombs on people because they're roughhousing?
No, and I guess neither one of us can speak to that exact event, but I know the supposedly at the 14th, rolling guys up was a thing. I'm assuming, and yeah, but it was never done. I don't think in a malicious way. It was almost it was like a rite of passage. It was a brotherhood thing.
You earned it.
Yeah. And
I mean, you got rolled up on your birthday, or you were leaving the squadron. I mean, or in my case, most 3 to 4 or 5 days a week. But it wasn't that I did it on purpose. Like, I remember, walking into Bravo flight because they asked where the vacuum was. Yes, we only had one vacuum. And I walked in and just threw the vacuum and go, here's your fucking vacuum, as an E3. And I knew what I was getting myself into, but just my reward for that was the look on all their faces when the cherry just did that. And then I'm like, all right, I'm ready to take my beating.
Yeah, and you were probably running around the building with the giant parachute.
That was the best. We had these massive. It was like airborne wings that were cut out of a piece of 3/4 inch plywood and spray painted gray, and then it had everybody's name on the back of the wings with their time on what their time was for 3 laps around the bay. And there is an art to it. Once you figure it out, you can shave off almost 20 seconds of your time, because what happens is initially guys want to cut inside too much and they hit those wings on the metal poles around the bay and it spins you around.
Now, I always thought that was a almost necessary unofficial aspect of that lifestyle, and I thought it was good.
Well, and I've written an article on this before, but to me, there never was a negative impact on the way that the guys were out there. If anything, like yeah, they were hard on you. Like, they were super hard on you. They were mean. You got the fucking shit smoked out of you on a regular basis. Like, if you couldn't answer a question, if you didn't know, if you didn't know something you should have known, if you didn't do what you were supposed to do, you're picking up 2 jerry cans full of water. You're going to start running and you're going to pay. Well, at the same time, and I've said this a couple times when I go and speak to the students out here, it's, I tell them, when a few years down the road, when I'm 21 years old and I'm the only JTAC in an entire battalion of Army guys, and I'm sitting in a talk with nothing but guys captain and higher, I don't feel intimidated in that setting, because I was conditioned to such a high standard of just, personal tolerance of kind of interaction and shit talking and all that stuff, that it was like, I'm not afraid at that point to speak up if I think something's wrong, or if I think we can use something better that an air asset offers. Like I'm not, it taught me to like just not have fear in a complex social situation like a talk or something like that. So I attribute everything that those guys did and everything that they did for me, like it helped later down the road.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I'd really be remiss in speaking of the community not to highlight what you're talking about and put it in a different way. I know that you have a diverse audience and all may not be military experts, but a senior airman like you were,
The E4.
E4,
Yeah.
the mated Army liaison, who you're liaisoning with, is a lieutenant colonel, Army battalion commander. And in some cases, that was the extreme in low rank. But so we had an E4 going toe to toe with a fire breathing Army infantry battalion commander representing the air component, all air power, to that entire 700-man battalion through that infantry officer who was probably sitting around 20
years in the 82nd because they didn't leave.
Nope.
So, yeah, you had some very stubborn, very hard-headed, just angry individuals that I've got to go and convince him that I'm going to be good at what I say I'm going to do.
Yeah. And that, talk about putting a guy on the spot. And there was no, you can't have redos. You're in combat and you have to make your case to the battalion commander. You have to represent the Air Force 3-star. And what that did, though, is when you came back and you had those kinds of experience, the preparation that you had when you did things that were on the base, like we're, at Pope Air Force Base at the time, there was an air contingent. So you had a whole bunch of airmen. And then we'd have the ALS, the Airman Leadership School. Our guys would crush it because they were so mature. They, like you said, in social situations, you're not. What are you going to be embarrassed by? You're just on the line.
This was something I realized a couple years ago. After being out and being in different circles and stuff like that, and hanging out with a bunch of high-ranking individuals in DC and things like that. But you realize, where else in the military does an E4 or E5 understand the military decision-making process and how wars are fought utilizing like global assets? Like you start to realize, like, oh, when I see a young, senior lieutenant or a captain looking at me like I'm a deer in the headlights while I'm talking to a 1-star or 2-star about, hey, okay, yeah, this happens, this, and then the AOC does this, and then we're here, this is what goes down here, and these guys are like, what? And then you kind of realize, like, okay, our entire, from the time we are literally just students in our career field, we are taught how to plan, and then how that planning goes all the way up to the entire military level, like of the DoD. So it's like, when we go through the MDMP portion of the training, you're learning how a decision comes from the president, goes to the Secretary of Defense, and what happens to that decision as it goes down the chain. There aren't many A4s out there that have any understanding of that.
No, and that's what I took a lot of pride in being, I guess, graced with the opportunity to lead young men and now women in those positions with that responsibility. You look at them and you go, man, I couldn't be any prouder. And it's a tough job. It's you have that liaison responsibility we just talked about. That's one thing, but then you got to be a technical expert. You got to be a technical and tactical expert in what you do. So, okay, now you got to fight it out with the lieutenant colonel, but then you also got to get the bombs on target. Make sure you're not going to hurt any friendlies. Get the right effects. Sequence the aircraft so you're not sending bombs home. Got to understand the 3-dimensional airspace. It's amazing.
Yeah, but even then, and pushing that back to understand that the way that you operate every day in a theater with planning directly affects how much support you're going to get later down the road. So if you're not planning or you're not requesting assets from the Air Force and you're just waiting for something to happen and hope that you can call a troops in contact and pull an aircraft from somewhere, well, that's going to lower the amount of allocation of air power that we're going to get for that theater, because when they start assessing the data, they see, well, they're not really requesting a lot. So it's a super complex deal. But another fun fact about you is your degree is in physics, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen Interstellar?
Yes.
What'd you think of it? Could you understand it better than I can?
No.
Oh, okay.
Don't feel bad. Yeah, I didn't quite get it. But
what about these two new tapes they just released this week? The Lightning AT tapes of these UFOs.
I thought that was a joke. I didn't look at it.
Was it? It's legit.
Yeah, really?
You should watch them because it's hard to explain.
Well, that's cool. I'm going to look at that.
One of the videos has the audio of the pilots. So yeah, you can hear what they're talking about while they're like, "What is this thing?" But he locks it up with an AT pod, and it was doing some wacky stuff.
Were they throwing some alien chaff out?
It was just, I mean, you're seeing white hot and black hot footage. You're seeing IR footage, so you see a heat signature. It's just the mechanics of it. Like, it's doing things, it's rotating while it's going incredibly fast forward, like in a headwind. Like one of the tapes, they were in 120 knot headwind, and this thing was accelerating, and then it was rotating and turning around on them. Like, so it's just weird.
Yeah, I actually thought about cracking back open some of the old physics books, because I don't think I can split an atom today. I probably forgot all that stuff. But
so you wouldn't be somebody that, like a weird organization that steals a nuke. They have to get the physicist to put it together. I just watched a movie that they needed the physicist.
Yeah. Well, I always think, as you're getting older, that, how every kind of B movie has a guy working on an old truck in an open field, and a helicopter lands, and the guys get out and they say, dude, we need you. And it's like, okay, here I go. I'd say, nah. Okay.
I don't think I could do that anymore.
Not on the physics part. You want me to go fight somebody? Sure, but.
Well, this was awesome. So, if anybody out there is thinking about putting their toe in the water to start a book, how can they get a hold of you? How can they throw a submission out to you? How can they get in touch with A15 Publishing?
Excuse me. We have a website, www.a15publishing.com, and you can email us at info@a15publishing.com.
Awesome. So if you ever thought about it, now's the time. Hit up Pete and see if you can throw your hat in the ring for this. We're going to have to do it again. We're going to have to continue down some of these stories and get deeper into them and talk about some of the other things that you've been doing lately, because it's hyper interesting. So thanks for coming on, Pete. It's a pleasure.
Well, thanks for having me, JT. It's awesome.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Free Range Demand.